If you've been through a traumatic breakup or a divorce, finding a path to forgive your partner is agonizing. Listen in as Angie Hooper, founder of the Forgiveness Path, shares practical action steps to break free from the pain of divorce and move forward without regrets. This is the Silver Divorce Podcast, broadcast from the Whitfield Media Group studios in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Brought to you by our title sponsor, the Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, and show sponsor, Medicare Misty. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics is the area's leading provider of multi-specialty orthopedic care. Using innovative surgical techniques and technologies, their team of specialists deliver exceptional results backed by exceptional patient care. Learn more at sportmed.com. Medicare Misty is a real person who can help answer your Medicare questions. Get real help from her team at medicaremisty.com. I'm your host, Lisa, and before we start, I welcome your questions, your topic ideas, suggestions to silverdivorcepodcast@gmail.com, and please subscribe and share your comments online. Also, join our Facebook and Instagram pages at Silver Divorce Podcast. And now, let's podcast. Well, today I am so pleased to be joined by Angie Hooper. She is a practicing lawyer and a certified professional coach. She is the one who developed this forgiveness path, and she helps people break free from the past. She helps create a path to a new future without regret by teaching the skill set of forgiveness. Hello, Angie.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
I'm doing well. So how are things in Oklahoma?
It's finally a little chilly, and we might end up with the leaves off these trees finally.
Wonderful.
It's been hanging on.
Well, it's kind of like that here in Tennessee. It's gotten cold, but the leaves are still on the trees and turning color. So they'll probably drop when it's, nothing but cold weather and you can't get out and do anything about it. So that's all right.
Yeah, we love a sweater, though, so it's good.
That's right. And I have to tell you, the only thing I know about Oklahoma is that's where Blake Shelton is from.
Hey, that's all you need to know. That's all you need to know.
So I love Okies just for that reason. Well, I'm very excited to talk about forgiveness because I personally really struggled with how to forgive somebody who put you through so much trauma. And
Well, I mean, really, I developed this for myself. And the moment that I knew I needed to figure it out, because there's so many myths around what forgiveness is and how you do it. And I had felt all that pressure too. People that love you and care about you will say, oh, you just gotta, fill in the blank. And it's usually one of those forgiveness myths, right?
Yeah. I went through divorce care and there's a whole chapter on forgiveness. And, I thought, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah.
I'm fresh in this and you're telling me I have to forgive. I don't think so.
Yeah. And I think that really speaks to one of the myths. I mean, for me, the sort of crystallizing moment was, now, I've been very lucky to be successful and have opportunities in my life. And I was the, shall we say, payor in the divorce settlement, right? So I was sitting at my desk one day at work in my nice office, getting ready to write an alimony check, and I had my pen sort of hovering over the memo line, and I was about to, it's not funny, but it's funny now because I've been through the process. I was about to write on the memo line of that check, I hope you choke on this money.
Oh,
I know. And I stopped myself and I was like, who are you being? Like, who are you becoming in this moment? And it really sort of shocked me into thinking, like, how do I figure this out? Because having that much anger, and this was months after the divorce was final, right? But still having that much anger and having that much of my soul and my emotional energy tied back to those past moments was not available. Like, I knew that I needed all of that to move forward and build the life I wanted. And here I was about to, just be real like mean and snarky on a memo line on a check. I mean, who was that?
Right. It scares you when you can feel like you are holding that much hate, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the only way I can describe it, is that you feel this intense hatred, and it's scary.
Yeah. And covering over it isn't really the solution, right? Like sometimes people think they can white knuckle through it. And like if I just say, oh, I've moved on enough times that it will be true. And one of those myths is that time will solve the problem by itself. And time can certainly support having the perspective and the frame of reference to go through the process, but time by itself doesn't really fix the problem. And it saying that kind of reminds me of a woman that I worked with at the time when I was getting divorced, and she came by my office. People kind of will kind of come alongside you, and they'll be like, hey, I heard it's going to be okay. And they'll tell you, kind of like when you're having a baby, people want to tell you their labor stories. When you get divorced, people want to tell you their divorce story. And she told me the most, blood curdling story about why she left her ex-husband. And she was using all these present tense verbs like it had just happened. And I was like, oh my golly, how did you survive all of that? And she said, well, she kind of told me that part of the story. And then I realized it had happened much longer ago than the language she used would have indicated, right? And it turned out it had been 17 years.
Oh my gosh.
Since that moment, but she was still telling the story like it happened last week.
And reliving it.
Yeah, and that kind of current state of pain is really what forgiveness is designed to do, to relieve us from staying in that present state of pain and having part of our lives still back in that past moment.
So, and do you find, Angie, that some people stuff it down? They think, oh, if I just stuff it down and don't talk about it, they're reliving it in their head, and then you have the person who you just spoke about who is verbalizing it.
Yeah.
Are those, two ways that you see? And
yeah, I think some people do. They'll sort of numb out on it, or they want to be the person who has forgiven, because like the way they want to see themselves and the way they want to move through the world is a person who's able to sort of like, quote, let it go, or quote, get over it. And they don't want to necessarily go through the emotional experience of, I'm going to let myself feel this anger, because it's a hard thing to do. Some of these emotions are not pleasant.
Right. And also, is it the perception maybe that, well, if I say I've forgiven, then I'm the better person? And maybe do you find that some people are doing it outwardly, but internally they're still internalizing all the pain?
Yeah. And really, people they'll do themselves a disservice by saying they'll even tell you, and maybe even believe it on a surface level. Oh, I forgave him. Oh, I'm over it. But then if they take a step back and look at, when do they get angry? What triggers them to want to write, I hope I choke on this money. I hope you choke on this money, right? Like, what are those moments where and maybe they lose it in front of their kid, or it'll come out in a new relationship, right? I spent so many years as a lawyer doing contracts and deals, and I would say to people, everybody's always negotiating the last deal, right? The thing you worry about now is the thing that went wrong last time. And that comes up in our romantic relationships and in our family relationships too. Whatever went wrong the last time that I haven't resolved by forgiving is the thing that I'm going to worry about and be fixated on this time, right? So you can unintentionally bring that into your new life when you really want to leave it in the past with that past relationship.
It's like that old image of, the guy with a rope carrying this big, huge sled of weights behind him wherever they go. And
Yeah.
So, yeah. It is very hard. So let's just talk about if, we are not in that place where we think I'm not ready to forgive. I know there's a physical effect to us to hanging on.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share with us some of the physical aspects of that?
Yeah, I mean, anything that causes you stress is going to have that dampening effect on your immune system. It can cause you to not sleep well at night, right? Like if the thing your ex did is the thing that you wake up thinking about at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, that is impacting your sleep and your ability to perform the way you want to during the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we want to notice when that's happening and notice what is the thing that I think about when I wake up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and it's been processing in my sleep, right? Like that tape's been playing in my mind. And even things like when that certain subject comes up, if you've had the experience of finding out your ex has committed to somebody new,
Mm-hmm.
right? You might not want them, but that doesn't mean you want them to be happy.
Right.
Right. And some people get competitive about it,
Yeah.
and I'll say him because that's kind of what my frame of reference is. But some people will get competitive and say, well, why should he find happiness with somebody new? Or they'll be snarky about the new person in their ex's life. So those are just ways that we notice that something hasn't been resolved.
Yeah, you want them to burn in hell.
It's so funny. And thank you for saying that out loud, because there's so many times where we really kind of wish for revenge,
right?
But we'll put it in a costume of justice, right? Like
yes.
He should get what he deserves, or we'll put a karma suit on it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's really important to know if you have that feeling, if you're still in the process, because it is expensive to be mad.
Yeah,
right?
And if you think about it, putting it in the hands of karma, you're really not letting go then. You're just kind of waiting on the sidelines for something bad to happen so you can celebrate it, right?
Right. And then you think, who would do that? But then if you start to really be honest with yourself, and you don't have to tell anybody, this can be just like you and us right here, safe zone. If you really admit to yourself, yeah, I hope he gets, a really ugly rash on his tush, right? Like whatever the thing is that you kind of secretly wish for. I hope that rash comes back.
Yeah.
And those are just little ways that we sort of let the pressure off on what's really a desire for them to suffer, because we think that will make us feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the myths that I hope people can see through today is that forgiveness is different than justice. It's a different thing. Forgiveness is really about how you yourself call back your spirit and your emotional energy from that past event or from that past relationship. It's not really about making it right in society. You see the distinction there?
I do. That's huge.
It's huge. Forgiveness is different than justice. It's different than revenge. It's different than letting it go, right? Like we can forgive and still learn from what happened.
So it's not forgive and forget.
No. And as a matter of fact, me personally, I wouldn't recommend forgetting. Like that person showed you who they are in the actions that they took.
Mm-hmm.
Now forgive and move forward. Like let's say you're in a space where you are in a position where you want to forgive and resolve that past event because you want to continue in that relationship, right?
Right.
And we want to make sure we remember that forgiveness and reconciliation are different. Some people will hold back from forgiving because they're afraid it means they have to continue to be involved with that person in some way, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where that forgive and forget can be kind of a tricky idea, because if you forgive and forget, does that mean you're going to make yourself vulnerable again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow, that's really powerful, because if you forgive, and learn, then are you able to go forward and have an interaction with that person without it summoning up all of the emotions again and the hatred again. And,
Yeah.
it is more of a path forward, it seems like.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. My daughter had just about to turn 9 when my divorce was final from my ex. And one of the things that helped me with that idea of forgive and learn was that I could see that he would engage in behaviors that I felt like were not positive. From my point of view, and he tells this story differently,
Oh, of course.
right? From my point of view, he was manipulative and didn't really listen to others. Didn't respect other people's wants, right? So that's what was my experience of him. And so, with her being at an age where she was going to be over there, he's always going to be her dad. Being able to have perspective that was my experience, and I learned from that. And I didn't need to be angry or defensive when I would see a situation, and it allowed me to be a better parent to her. And when she asked for advice about how to relate to her dad, I was able to come to it from a much different perspective, because it wasn't about revenge by saying, oh, see, I told you he was a big jerk, right? Because you can't put that on a kid. You don't want to, right? And relating to her in terms of, when people do this, here are your choices as an empowered person, right? As an empowered 10-year-old,
right?
These are your choices. As an empowered 16-year-old, these are your choices. And, one day it'll be as an empowered 30-year-old, these are your choices, right? If she's still coming to me for advice at that time.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but that idea that reconciliation and forgiveness are different, right? I think the fear that we have to let things go back the way they were if we forgive holds people back a lot.
And that's not true. You're really just creating a new dynamic, if you will, a new form of a relationship. And I can really relate to that, because I was holding on to a great deal of hate for my ex. And I realized that, that's not hurting him. It's hurting me. Yeah. I'm the one who, as you mentioned, are waking up at 3 a.m. and replaying all those scenes in my head. And I realized I had to find a way to forgive and let it go, so that, when I did encounter that person, because we have kids, adults, and it's not triggering. And once I did that, the next time I saw that person, I actually had a decent conversation and I wasn't triggered. And it was just like a miracle.
Yeah, this is the real key, the real treasure trove of forgiveness is the freedom that you feel to make choices in the next moment.
Oh, amen. Yes.
Yeah, that's really the beautiful thing that comes out of it. And so some of the things that hold people back from doing it are, they don't really, nobody really tells you how, the mechanics of it. I know, because I looked. I looked everywhere. I looked for books on forgiveness and everything. Anyway, and what I found was that lots of people would talk about it and tell you what a good idea it was, or tell you what the benefits were of doing it, but nobody could really say, okay, sit down and do this thing. Here's how you do it, right? So that's kind of what we put together in the forgiveness path. But on the way to that moment, some of these myths that we've been talking about are really recognizing where the myth might be at play is really step one for a lot of people. So recognizing, do you have a fear that forgiving would mean saying it was okay that it happened? Because you can forgive and reclaim your energy from that past event and still be certain that what happened was not okay. You can have those two thoughts simultaneously. Waiting on an apology is a big thing for some people. And apology is really more part of reconciliation than forgiveness. Forgiveness is a solitary action that you take for your own benefit. And I think that concept kind of blows people's minds sometimes.
Yeah. Also, first, I wanted to go back to what you said about not being able to find how to forgive. I was thinking about even in the Bible, it tells you that you should forgive, but it doesn't give you a path. It doesn't tell you how to do it. So you're kind of out here saying, what's the next step? And that brings me to a lot of people think, am I giving up? Am I going to be seen as weak if I say, I forgive this person and I have a different approach around him or how I speak about him? Does that make me look weak?
Right. And I think it comes from two places, right? Sort of two forgiveness myths at play in that feeling. One is that it will say it sometimes if someone does apologize, and we'll say it's okay.
Right.
They can apologize and you can receive that apology and still not agree that what happened was okay. Right. Yeah. And the corollary to that is when someone else tells you it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of judgment and comparison that can happen even with people who love us, who want us to feel better by trying to convince us that the thing that hurt us was not as bad as we say it was.
Yeah,
right?
It's invalidating how we feel and what we think.
And it's a funny thing because when you're on the receiving end, it feels very hurtful potentially. But when you're if you're ever on the offering end of that, it comes from a place of, I want you to be okay and not get hung up on this thing that I don't think is a big deal. Right? Mm-hmm. So one way to handle that is to ask yourself if you believe your own story about what happened. And it's amazing to me how many times people will second guess their own version of the story.
Right.
Because somebody else said it happened a different way.
That also makes me think about asking yourself, what role did I play? And honestly, being able to answer that.
Yeah, that's a ninja move right there.
Right.
I used to do workshops at this cool place up in Western Massachusetts, up in the mountains, go stare at my navel for a week kind of place. And one of the things that we would examine in ourselves at that place was what were the choices that I made that brought me here. And when you do that, I think it's really important to approach it from a place of deep love and acceptance for yourself. Because who you are today is not the same person as the person who made that decision. And that was the place where someone had said to me, how did you and your ex even get together? You guys are so different. And I said, sure, today. But 10 years ago, when I wasn't strong enough in my own identity to tell you what my name was, he was perfect for me because he was very happy to tell everybody who he thought I should be. Right? It was a perfect match.
Yeah.
And the idea that I had chosen him deliberately as a means to become the person I wanted to be was kind of shocking to my brain when I first had that thought. But I can confidently say I wouldn't be who I am and where I am today without his, call it assistance, right? Without his participation in my experience of life for those 10 years we were married.
Yeah, that's powerful because we are not the same people 30 years later than when we married.
Yeah. And wouldn't want to be, frankly.
No, we're not designed to be. You're designed to evolve and grow and prosper as a human being. But I do want to go back to one thought. I found that the more I honestly question myself, what role did you play, Lisa? The more I moved toward forgiveness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think it was part of building that story of what did you believe really happened, instead of other people saying, oh, well, we didn't like what he said to you this time we were all at dinner, or well, maybe I should have done a thing, second guessing yourself, or sometimes the ex comes in and says, well, it was all your fault.
Right.
Same ex, my daughter's father. We were leaving marriage counseling, and he had just said to the therapist, well, I feel fine. I think if we could fix her, then everything. And I was sitting there thinking, wait, what? So many gifts came from that relationship, right?
Oh, right.
But some of them were unintentional gifts, and some of them came in kind of crazy looking wrapping paper when they first showed up. And that is the end state of forgiveness, I think, is being able to recognize what was the gift that I received? Why did I show up to this relationship in this way? Why did I choose this person, right? Mm-hmm. Those are all things that are hard questions to ask if you're adding a judgment to it, right? So if it's, well, why did I do that, you dummy? If you're asking it that way, that's not necessarily a helpful question. That's really more of a pain-based question you're asking yourself to make sure you don't do it again, right? As opposed to, what was I believing about the world or about myself that made me think that this was an okay thing? That this was an okay way to be treated? Or what did I miss in the development of this relationship? What were the red flags I overlooked? What were the values mismatches that I didn't respect? Somebody can be a good person and not match your values and be an inappropriate match for you, right? You can still like them. You can think they're hot stuff,
or funny,
and not be the right match for you.
Right. And it was interesting, the distinction you made about a pain-based approach, because in a pain-based approach, you're pretty much just beating yourself up, right?
Yeah.
And what you mentioned, it seems like it is more of a holistic approach where you're giving yourself permission and grace to have human failings, but not conking yourself over the head for being stupid.
Right,
Right.
And for some people, the person that they most need to forgive is themselves.
Right? Yes.
Yeah.
Got an injury that just can't wait? There's no need to delay your care. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics is excited to announce that our Urgent Ortho Walk-In Clinic is now available on Saturdays at the Gun Barrel Road location. Open from 8 to noon, we're here to treat sprains, strains, fractures, and more. No appointment needed. So skip the long ER wait and get specialized orthopedic care fast. Visit us this Saturday at Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics Urgent Ortho. We're the center for expert care right when you need it. Learn more at sportmed.com.
But if you only forgive somebody because they were wrong and bad, so here's an important thing to consider, which is we forgive an action that a person took. We forgive a betrayal. We forgive a thing that a person did. We don't forgive them for being who they are, right? We can not like who they are. That's right. Okay. You don't have to like everybody, but you don't forgive them for being essentially who they are. You forgive them for the action that they took that harmed you. And that distinction allows you to develop the story of what really happened. Do I believe that story that I tell myself? How does that story serve me in creating the life today that I want? Am I telling myself a story that's got part of my emotional energy hooked back in this past moment? And even in a long-term relationship with many hurts and many joys over the years, there's typically one or two events where this tore it, and that's the action that you would start with on your forgiveness journey. What was the thing? What was the thing that they did?
Wow, that is a powerful distinction. Forgiving them for the action that they took, not who they are. So, good heavens. Let me ask this question then. Some people think that if you're not religious, you can't reach a state of forgiveness, that's just a religious concept.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting to think of it that way because and I grew up in the Christian church. I taught Sunday school at the Methodist church for 16 years, right? So, but the forgiveness path is really set up to be non-sectarian. It's really, this is going to be a funny word to use, but it's really set up to be the mechanics. And I think of it as spiritual technology.
Yes.
Like here are the steps that we want to go through. And for a person, because, we got to be honest with ourselves that there are people who the person who hurt them was somebody in an authority position at a church, right? There are people
Yes.
who feel betrayed by the church, right? And so for them to put it in religious language becomes a barrier. So that's why it's really set up to be non-sectarian and about your spirit, your emotional energy. Who am I becoming? Who was I created to be if that language is meaningful to the person? But we really took a step back from the religious vocabulary because it takes the stakes down, right? A lot of churches conflate forgiveness with salvation theology.
Right.
And so, and we have language around that, right? Like, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors.
Yes.
Right? Oh, well, does that mean my salvation's at risk if I can't forgive my knucklehead ex-husband, right?
Yeah.
Suddenly the stakes are so high.
Yeah, and that
It
goes
just-
right.
yeah.
It goes back to being told you should forgive, and I
Yeah.
think the root of that is the idea of your salvation is dependent upon it.
Yeah, yeah. And it really creates a lot of pressure for people combined, especially if it's combined with some of these other myths around, saying it's okay, around justice versus revenge, around some of these other things. It can really, really create a lot of speed bumps toward forgiveness that we want to peel those apart and treat them as the separate concepts that they are. Forgiveness versus justice/revenge versus reconciliation versus, salvation.
As you talked about that, I kept thinking what we're really then approaching it as is the human condition
Yeah,
and the human faults and failings.
right.
So,
Right. Yeah, and being able to recognize that in ourselves and others, and also give ourselves the benefit and the honor of having standards and values that we live by and we request others relate to us with,
yeah, that's powerful. So, this is one question that comes up a lot. Do I have to tell the person I've forgiven them?
Oh, listen, I actually recommend that you don't.
I'm so glad you said that because
Yeah.
I can't imagine trying to do that.
Because here's how that conversation
Yeah.
is probably going to go. Dear ex, I just want you to know that I forgive you. And they say, for what? What do you mean? It was all, what do you mean? That wasn't even a big deal. What do you mean you forgive me? I forgave you, right?
Right.
That conversation's never going to go like you wanted it to go.
Or in your case, it would be you would say, "Dear ex, I forgive you," and he would say, "Well, it was all your fault."
It was all your fault anyway. Why? It was your fault. Yeah, exactly. And here's the root of that, right? Is that, and I said it earlier, but they are going to always tell that story differently.
Yes.
Whatever story is true, and it is absolutely true. I would have no doubt that stuff went down exactly the way somebody would describe to me it went down. But the other party involved is always going to tell that story differently.
And some stories about things that never happened. So
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
yeah.
That's right. And imagine if you were on the other side of that conversation, right? Like imagine your high school reunion, college whatever, and somebody walks up to you and says, "I just want to let you know that it's okay." And you're like, "What's okay?" "Well, that thing you said to me in the 10th grade, that sent me on a shame spiral and ruined my life and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, what?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you do have an impulse to sort of have a reconciliation moment, there's other ways to do it other than I forgive you. But I think it is important to really make that distinction that if, why are you wanting to tell them that they're forgiven? Are you wanting them to be contrite? Are you still looking for an apology that you're not ever going to get in a way that feels good enough? It just won't ever feel big enough.
It seems like it's about making us feel better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Or especially, let's just like put this one out there. Especially if you want to tell them you forgive them because you want them to be grateful, or you want to be congratulated, or you want somebody to tell you've been good because you forgave.
Seeking approval.
Yeah.
Still seeking approval from that person. Yeah.
And it's just very unlikely to go the way you think it's going to go.
Right. Yeah. So just be a civil human being and know you can have a relationship where you don't end up being triggered after each encounter because you have gone through that process.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, they will see it. You won't have to tell them.
Yes.
And some folks may find that the act of forgiveness itself has actually turned them into the one who got away. Right.
Right. Oh,
because because the act of forgiveness that brings wholeness back to you and brings you back to the person that you are today creating yourself to be, right? The person that you want to be, with the dreams and the goals and the love to give, because you've pulled back that emotional energy from the anger and the regret and the shame. You've pulled all that back, and it's available for love and joy and enthusiasm and curiosity, right? You may find that you've actually become the person that they thought you weren't anymore, right? So,
Wow. And what a great partner you're going to be for the next relationship.
Yeah.
So I know we've been talking about divorce, but can you apply this in your workplace?
Oh yeah, 100%. What was funniest to me is when I did this for my own relationship, and then it just so happened that at the time that occurred, I was working at a company that had been through a huge liquidity crisis and had laid off. I mean, it was actually you remember Enron? It wasn't Enron, but it was a company that had business deals with Enron. And when Enron went down the tubes, we had this huge liquidity crisis, cross defaults, blah, 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 right? And hundreds of people getting laid off. People lost their retirement, a lot of people in our town, because the headquarters is here, had invested in that company. So there were all these people who had all these feelings about all this stuff, right? And I remember sitting in meetings and like hearing people chit chat and thinking, oh my gosh, they're still hurt. Years later, they were still hurt because they'd lost money, and it wasn't about the money. It was about the betrayal,
Yes.
right? It wasn't about the layoff. It was about the betrayal. And so just like we don't forgive a person for being who they are, we can't forgive a company or a business for being who they are. But we can check if maybe we want to forgive the person who delivered the message.
Right.
Maybe we want to forgive the person who made the decision, right? Or the boss who didn't stand up for us, or the colleague who threw us under the bus, right? And so just like in romantic relationships, we'll take that to the next job or to the next deal. And it just takes up energy and mental capacity that you want to put towards your success, as opposed to defensively, trying to make sure that thing doesn't happen again. And business is a great place to practice the idea of forgive and learn, because we expect that. We expect to get smarter for the next deal or the next job. Yeah.
And I can't help but wonder if we're hanging on to a lot of anger and hate, if you will, in our business setting, if that isn't spilling over into our personal life, and then it's insidious and begins to infect our relationships at home. because
Right.
of how we feel about, because work is where we spend the majority of our time.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And for a lot of us, especially if you're in a role where a lot of your identity is tied to what's on your business card or what's on your email signature, right? Then a betrayal, you don't get the promotion, whatever it is,
Right.
can really affect our sense of self and our sense of self-worth. And oh gosh, I thought I was good at this. What are they seeing something I don't see? And a lot of that uncertainty can come through. So that can be really important. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and one of the things that's coming up a lot recently are people who invested in a coaching program to learn how to do a thing, marketing or whatever, right? And who felt betrayed by the person who was supposed to be teaching them. And people who have spent tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars on all these training programs and coaching and blah, 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 right? And they are so angry and fearful that it will happen to them again. They are holding themselves back from getting professional services. I'm seeing that lately. So in that sense, making a bad deal or making a business decision that didn't pan out can be emotionally really similar to being in a relationship that didn't pan out the way we wanted to.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it seems ironically that you mentioned that. I was on LinkedIn this morning and I was thinking, wow, there are a lot of people offering a lot of different classes nowadays to get better. And how do you know which ones are the good ones? How do you know which ones are the right ones?
Yeah. Oh, it's funny. I coach entrepreneurs on like how to set up their legal strategy, because I've done contracts for so long. And one of the things that I offer to my clients is like a little class on how to figure out if you're engaging an expert. Right. And
oh, wow.
how to, when you're hiring
Yeah.
a lawyer, how do you know if this lawyer's an expert or if they just woke up and decided to do divorces today because they got laid off from their job doing, commercial litigation, right?
Yeah.
And even being able to parse between who can address your issues, because there's some specialized issues out there. If one of the spouses is a veteran, if there are kids who have long-term special needs, if high net worth divorces are kind of a special category. Divorces with a lot of debt can be kind of a special category, stuff like that. And how do you know? And so anyway, so that's one of the things. And some of it is just being willing to go in and ask questions. And I always tell people the short version is, if you wouldn't spend that kind of money to let somebody come in and remodel your kitchen without a plan and an estimate,
Yes.
why in the world would you hire a coach or a lawyer or any kind of professional without getting them to give you kind of a roadmap and some kind of estimate, right? Not just an hourly rate. So,
Yeah, Angie, I'm gonna have you back on, and we're gonna talk about that. That question of how do I hire an attorney, it comes up all
totally.
the time.
Yeah,
And how do you know
yeah.
if an attorney is a good attorney? So,
Yep.
yeah,
yep.
that's big. So, if your path to forgiveness, can you just tell us how the program works? If I have listened to this and I'm
Yeah.
interested, what is the next step? How do I engage?
Yeah, we will have a cohort starting in the first quarter of 2025. So if they want to go to happyatlawgroup.com, they can get on the email list to get first kind of dibs on that cohort when it starts. It's a 28-day process that we put people through. We start with kind of an inventory of the hurts so that we can choose the event. We get clarity about the event that we want to forgive and the person who was involved in that event. And then we go through a process of clarifying, making sure we're not getting derailed by any of these myths, right? That we're really focused on the forgiveness piece, not reconciliation, not revenge. And we have the program set up to really bring you to a decision point, because I think it's one of the most important steps in the forgiveness process is to make sure that you are actually ready. If you're not ready, no, you don't have to. That's one of the biggest myths, is that you have to forgive somebody. Mm-hmm. You don't have to. You have you are entitled in your own mind to stay angry as long as you want to and it serves you. But at the moment it becomes destructive or hurtful, you're also empowered and entitled to take an action to release that anger. And we do it through a 28-day daily spiritual practice that we recommend when people are ready to make that last final step.
I love that. So especially the first of the year, people are always thinking about losing weight, getting in shape.
Yep.
This is a whole different perspective on getting in shape, getting your your soul in shape and your mindset in shape and ready to face that new year, letting go of so much pain and hurt.
Yeah.
So I love that idea. Okay. So I always ask this. So what's inspiring you lately?
Oh, what's inspiring me lately is seeing the fruition, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many times we get caught in the process of getting better, doing better, mindset work, diet, exercise, whatever. And the moments of gratitude and appreciation for what has happened up to now, I think is really important. And so when I sit and think about that, it's really having a few minutes outside. We spent so much time during the shutdowns in our homes, and having a few minutes outside. We were talking about the leaves changing color. Grounding ourselves to the present moment is so important right now.
Yes, I would say that's true.
Yeah.
So I know you've worked with a lot of people in leading them to a forgiveness path. Was there a particular person you worked with that just touched you and left an indelible mark on your work?
Yeah. It was funny. It was actually a lawyer I was coaching around her career. Had nothing to do with forgiveness when we started. We were working on a process that I use with lawyers and entrepreneurs to help them make decisions without regret. So it's the other half of forgiveness, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you move forward in a way making decisions that are aligned, you reduce your odds of having something to forgive later on, basically, is the idea.
Oh, okay.
And so we were going through this process, and we were talking about work, talking to our partners in the firm, and, she had decisions to make around whether she wanted to stay or do another thing. And every time she would get to the point of saying, this is what I want, she would start talking about her ex-husband every single time. And I finally was like, I've got this thing that it isn't part of your program, but maybe you want to do it. And a week later, so I gave her the first few tasks of the forgiveness path, and she came back a week later and she said, this changed my life.
Wow.
She said, I am shocked. She said, I had no idea how much of my energy was going towards being angry at him and keeping that story alive of all the things that he did that brought me to where I am today, as opposed to, okay, I am where I am today. Now what? And asking now what as a moment of optimism and hope and curiosity and infinite possibility. And
Wow.
So,
and that's probably true for a lot of us that have been through divorce. You don't realize what all you're carrying around related to your ex is affecting everything else in your life.
Yeah. And now what can be an expansive question or a limiting question.
Mm-hmm.
So when we can ask that question with curiosity and with a view that maybe the universe is a benevolent place, right? This is especially tough right now. There's so much negativity in personal interactions and, in the news and the social media and all the things, right?
Yeah, especially since the elections. I think the elections this time brought out so much negativity and hurt and friendships that are shattered over politics.
Yep. And right now we're in the middle of the holidays, right?
Yes.
And so if we could think of those moments where we say, okay, I could say, oh, now what? As opposed to, oh, I guess I only have one or two choices left, or I feel funneled down to this one choice that I don't like. If we could just, for a moment, assume that the universe is benevolent, that abundance is real, right? Like, let's just assume, we don't have to really believe it, right? We'll just like pretend for a minute that all that stuff is real, that joy is real, that we are creatures who experience our reality. And we could say, okay, in this world of infinite possibility, now what? Different question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to strip away all the preconceived ideas and really just do it with an open mind.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a great way to start the new year.
I love it.
I do too. Wonderful. This has been a delight. Thank you so much for joining me today, Angie.
Oh, thank you. I love talking about this stuff.
Oh, I know I could go on, but we are having you back to talk about those attorneys.
Oh, for sure. For sure. We will definitely do that.
Well, would you let our listeners know how they can reach you again and your social media information and your website, please?
Yes. We're at Happy at Law on Instagram and LinkedIn, Happy at Law LLC, or Angie Hooper on LinkedIn. And Facebook is happyatlawgroup.com is the easiest way to find us there, or the Happy at Law business page. And we'll have a link there to get to the Forgiveness Path stuff. So you'll see contract stuff and contract strategy and education for entrepreneurs, but we'll have a link there for people to find the forgiveness materials as well.
Wonderful. And I encourage you all to take some action quickly. That first quarter of 2025 could reshape your new year in 2025. So highly recommend. Well, thank you. And to our listeners, please join us on the next episode. And I welcome your feedback. Please leave a comment, or you may email me at silverdivorcepodcast@gmail.com, and join our Facebook and Instagram pages at Silver Divorce Podcast. Please leave a rating and a review as well. That does help us to attract great guests like Angie. And I want to thank our title sponsors, Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, and show sponsor, Medicare Misty. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics is the area's leading provider of multi-specialty orthopedic care. Using innovative surgical techniques and technologies, their team of specialists deliver exceptional results backed by exceptional patient care. Learn more at sportmed.com. And Medicare Misty is a real person who can help answer your Medicare questions. Get real help from her team at medicaremisty.com. Whether you are considering divorce or are newly in the divorce process, we'll help you on your journey. So until next time, remember, divorce is one event. It does not define who you are. I'm Lisa, and I'll see you next time.